Angela Flournoy, the author of The Turner House. First of all, welcome to the Midwest Literary Walk. Great to have you here.
I am happy to be here. Thank you.
Your book delves into the changing neighborhoods of Detroit, a city that you have a background with. Why don't you explain that to us first?
So my father grew up in Detroit on the east side of the city, and I have been coming here throughout my life, and I've always sort of been fascinated with the way that his neighborhood in particular has changed just over my lifetime, and I've sort of always imagined what it must feel like for him for it to have changed so much over his lifetime. And particularly the house that he grew up in. So that was sort of the beginnings of my story, was just sort of imagining what it feels like to experience sort of rapid kind of depopulation in the neighborhood you're from, and just other sort of changes, and how that kind of changes your relationship with your own kind of personal history.
So tell us, just from the time that you remember, the changes that you saw in the neighborhood that you would visit when you were a kid to today.
Well, one particular thing I remember that my father, every time we used to come to Detroit, we would go to it's like a shrimp house called O'Quinn's on Gratiot, and there used to be 2 locations on Gratiot. And I remember very distinctly the first time when the first location closed, it was just like a tragedy. And then a few years later, the second location closed, and just sort of he was very good friends with the owners, and he would always, he grew up with them, and he would always stop by and talk to them, and sort of feeling kind of bereft. But I just sort of felt like, what if this was happening sort of with almost everything you know? What if this is happening with the school you went to, which is the case for him, the high school he went to, which is the case for him? What does that do sort of to your kind of idea of taking a trip down memory lane, if there's nothing on memory lane necessarily anymore?
So you come back though still, and when you talk about the Turner House, it starts with Leela, one of your characters, having to move back into that house. All the other Turners have moved out, including the matriarch who's moved into the suburbs, that story that happens. Leela comes back, and the story then revolves around the personality of that house as well. And the house becomes one of the characters, one of the Turners in a sense.
Yes, so when I first, like you said, I had the idea, or sort of the character of Leela was the first one that I had fully developed. And then when I decided that I wanted to explore kind of my other preoccupations, I come from several large families, so I wanted to sort of explore that dynamic of what it feels like to be a part of something so large. It only seemed sort of natural that a way to tie everybody back together would be around this house, and that's also a way to show just sort of how many opinions you have to contend with when you're around something so large. I mean, when you're a part of something so large. So particularly, and it doesn't have to be in the case of a house on the east side of Detroit, but a lot of people, it becomes a point of contention in their families. What are we going to do about our parents' house or some sort of shared property? I have friends from all different backgrounds who that's the last time that their dad talked to their uncle was about some sort of big decision like that had to be made, because it's part of sort of what we think of when we think of the American dream, but it's also what we think about just more personally, and where is the site of our memories? What is sort of the evidence that we exist? And it's this place for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, it comes down to an actual site. And so it only seemed natural to sort of have everybody's kind of storylines revolve around that.
Mm-hmm. Your mom is traveling with you, or she is here today with us, which is really wonderful. Does she have different memories than you do about those houses, similar to the things? And were you able to bring in sort of that multi-generational approach to this as you thought about the book and how to tell the story?
Well, my mother comes from a family of a lot of women. So she was just, when she sort of met my father's family, she was always just into it. And when she was in Detroit, she was always sort of into it, because she's from Southern California. And I think her experiences have sort of helped also, when you live in other parts of the country, you sort of get just bad news about Detroit. But I think my book is filled with a lot of warmth, because that was sort of her first experience, and it in turn became my first experience with the city. So even though, to be sort of fair and to be sort of kind of accurate, you show sort of all sides of a city in a novel, I tried to communicate that the core of my book is certainly warmth and kind of resilience, and a lot of things to be proud about.
This is your debut. This is a brand new experience for you. What's it been like to see that idea come from head to paper, now into the newspapers as people write about your success?
It's bigger than I could have ever imagined. One of the things I think is for me that I had to sort of learn was just to kind of submit to what I was doing then, which is I am working on a book, not sort of have lofty sort of ideas of what might happen when that book is in the world. I kind of submitted to it. I think in the beginning, maybe I thought that it was going to be a quicker project than it was, but once I really decided that I wanted to make this book sort of more nuanced and more kind of thorough, then I stopped thinking about what would happen right now. So everything that's happening now is just like a delight. It's great. Yeah. I'm very sort of grateful.